welcome to yet another episode of Behind the Returns. As always, we have yet another super interesting guest with us. Today, we have somebody from the debt side. Usually, we've had a lot more people coming from the equity side, but today we have somebody from the debt side, and as we all know, debt markets have been a little volatile, and most of us want to understand as to what is happening. So here is the best person to help us out with regards to that. And we have Mr. Mahendra Kumar Jaju, who is the CIO of Mirae Asset Mutual Fund in terms of their entire debt portion. Hi, Mr. Mahendra Kumar Jaju, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Arun. My pleasure to have been invited for this interesting session.
Yeah. So let me start off with a very basic question. So most of us are very comfortable when it comes to the FD investments. Like you pick a good bank and then you put your money there. You know what is the return that you're getting, and like you're sorted. But when it comes to debt mutual funds, there are so many categories. There are so many nuances. So just wanted to start off with something fairly very basic, that how does somebody go about building a debt mutual fund portfolio? Is there any framework that you can suggest to our viewers so that they can think through this whole process of putting together a decent debt mutual fund portfolio?
So that's a very interesting question. When people normally invest in debt, they think in terms of the certainty of the return. Debt mutual funds offer a very good option to the debt investors. The key difference between the debt mutual funds and any other option is that debt mutual funds offer a market related return. Now, typically when people invest in debt, the overwhelming emotion is that of the safety, that of protection of capital, and certain minimum decent return. uh, I think the correct framework to look at debt as an investment is with two objectives. One is to maximize your return, because whenever you are investing, your objective should be to maximize your return. And the second is to choose the right product. Now, when you're talking about choosing the right product, it means the risk return profile of that fund should match your risk preference and your risk taking capability. Why this is important? Let me make a simple example. Typically, when we talk about investing in debt, the most common feedback or response we get is that why for 1% extra return I should take so much volatility, I should take so much risk and so on. Just think about it. If you're investing 1 crore rupees and you want 1% extra return, then over a period of 10 years, you make 10 lakhs extra. Over a period of 20 years, you make 20 lakh extra. Over a period of 30 years, you make 30 lakhs extra. If you inbuild the compounding component, it maybe is 35 lakhs rupees. So you make 35% extra over a 30-year period. Now, why we are referring to 30-year period? It's the typical investment life of an average investor. Let's say starts investing at 25 and goes up to 55. So the point is that by taking a right option, one ends up making a huge amount of extra terminal wealth. Now, what is the risk of investing in debt funds? What is the risk of investing in debt mutual funds? The most common risk which petrifies investors is the volatility. They just can't bear a little bit of dip in the NAV. They just want an Excel based daily accrual kind of an FP product. But the risk in the mutual funds is of two categories. One is the interest rate risk, the other is the credit risk. Now, our view is that if someone is trapped in interest rate volatility, then over a period of time, the interest rates are cyclical in nature and therefore it evens out. The problem is when you hit a credit event, and in the Indian context, then the recovery becomes very difficult. So, to build a proper portfolio of the debt investments, for someone who is looking at a long term asset allocation approach to debt, I think they should choose long term debt funds which have historically given close to double digit returns in India, and nothing is going to change dramatically. The same pattern will emerge. The moment we get out of the mindset of fear and protection and allow our money to work in the optimal way, I think there is a significant improvement in the return profile. And with a slight change or slight improvement in the return, it can make a lot of difference to our terminal wealth. So I think the key change in the mindset that is required at the first step to build a good portfolio is to shift from saving to investment approach, shift from putting money in a safe deposit to putting money at work, take an asset allocation approach, and then I think the whole thing falls into place. And then there are different options in debt mutual funds. You have the bond funds, you have the gilt funds, you have the banking and PSU funds. So for each person, experts like you can suggest them what should be the right product he chooses. But at the core of it, long-term investment with a acceptance of certain bit of volatility in order to improve return, because there is a lot of insurance cost you pay for a certain return. So if you accept that little bit of volatility, make it work in your favor, you can have a significantly better terminal wealth.
So now that you broadly set a framework in order to build your debt portfolio, so next when it comes to actually selecting the funds, obviously there's a gamut of funds available under each and every category. Now in order to select, I mean, in order to tell exactly how to select, there'll obviously be several nuances based on category. But at a broader level, if you were to suggest, say, these are the most important parameters that are non-negotiable whenever it comes to picking funds, how would your broad checklist look like in terms of when somebody is selecting debt funds? These are few parameters that they should definitely and compulsorily monitor.
So I think broadly we can put it in a four-factor matrix. So the two variables are the long term versus short term, and the other two variables are the uh, low risk versus high risk. Now, risk, as I mentioned in the debt fund, is on account of two primary factors. One is the interest rate volatility risk, the other is the credit risk. And then, therefore, I think you put the long term and short term versus the duration risk versus the credit risk, and then the investor can decide what he wants to choose. Whenever you are lending money to someone, the most important part is that your money comes back in time, because if he doesn't pay you back in time, then all your return calculations will be invalidated. Therefore, it is important to avoid aggressive credit risk. Most of the time, people are afraid of volatility, and therefore they will want to earn a little bit higher return than the bank fixed deposits. And in that process, most of the time, a portfolio is also created in a way which is like a bank, because if the fund manager is trying to generate a return little better than the bank FD, then in a way he will end up creating a portfolio which is like a bank loan portfolio. Now, the SEBI chairman has also said that mutual funds are investors and they're not bankers. Therefore, I think the first important criteria to keep in mind is to avoid aggressive credit risk, because the longer is your investment horizon, the higher is the uncertainty of how things will evolve. We have a rapidly changing world. We know that a lot of companies which were blue chip 10 years back today don't exist, and a lot of companies which were there, which were not even there 10 years back, are now the market leaders. So, in such a uh, rapidly changing world, it is important to have the visibility of the cash flow of the company for the longer term. Now, the best way to avoid uncertainty is to minimize your credit risk. Now, you look at the interest rate risk. Interest rate risk is largely reflected in the volatility of the NAV. So, again, if you have a longer investment horizon, then interest rates being cyclical in nature will go up and down. But eventually, when one complete interest rate cycle is completed, your NAV will give you a good, happy investing experience. So, therefore, if you put your parameters into four factors. Uh, if you have long-term money, invest in a high quality bond fund or a long duration fund where you can gain by way of the market volatility of interest rates rather than being adversely affected or sacked by it. If you have a short-term investment horizon, then for look for funds with a lesser volatility potential. And then I think again, you know, you don't have to then worry about so many types of debt funds and so many subtle variations, etc. Today, the SEBI has done great work in terms of categorizing the funds, so you know with a reasonable accuracy what is the broad investment pattern and the underlying portfolio of those funds. And then secondly, there is a very new rule which has come, which will ask for the funds to, you know, disclose their riskometer score. Now riskometer is very in depth in terms of understanding the risk pattern of the fund, because it comprises of three variables: liquidity risk, the interest rate risk, and the credit risk. Therefore, even if there are subtle differences, for example, a company may have a highest short-term rating of A1 plus, but its long-term rating may be in the range of triple A to A1 plus. So in a riskometer scoring, each of these factors will have a different weight. So therefore, the riskometer combined with the category gives you a very good idea about how that fund's risk profile or the return profile would be. Therefore, just to summarize, I think if you have a longer investment horizon, then you should look at a high duration fund which will generate higher returns over a longer period of time. The trade-off is that in the short term you may get affected because of the uh, interest rates going up, and then NAV may dip for 3 to 6 months, but that is not a reason to worry. If you are a short-term investor, you have money for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Don't take any risk. Put it in a safe fund like liquid fund or a low duration fund where you have a much reduced volatility. Common theme should be to not take aggressive credit risk, because that is the one thing that can go wrong with an investment in a debt fund.
Sure. So let's say once somebody decides that let me not take an aggressive credit risk, so one part of it is kind of solved. So now coming to the second part, which is on how do we handle the interest rate risk. So how do you go about understanding these cycles? So there are, I mean, obviously in a cycle where the rates are going down, all funds get volatility on the upside, so everybody is happy. But however, it's the other end where, let's say, interest rates eventually at some part of the cycle will have to also start inching or start to go up. So in that sense, a lot of funds might see a lot more volatility than usual. So broadly, how does somebody get a sense of where are we in the interest rate cycle? So how do you, when you manage your duration within your funds, how do you go about evaluating where we are in the cycle with respect to interest rates?
So we have a well-developed investment process. We have a mechanism where we track number of variables which can affect the interest rate market. So you have a whole range of macroeconomic factors like the GDP growth rate, the credit growth rate, the inflation rate, the current account deficit. Then you have the global interest rate environment. You have the monsoon, situation, whether monsoon is surplus, which is going to keep the food prices lower, or if you have a monsoon deficit where the crops may be affected and the you know food prices may go up, and that can affect the inflation. So there are a whole host of factors which affect the interest rates. So we have a system of continuously monitoring the the factors. Now another thing to note is that at different times, different factors take the precedence. So there are times when inflation becomes the driving force behind the interest rate movement. There are times when the liquidity becomes the driving force behind how the interest rates may act. There are times like we had in the last 6 months where the inflation was high, but the overriding priority of the central bank was to support the nascent economic recovery. Therefore, it is also important to have the big picture or the overall context in mind. Now, that is something which is the job of an expert. Now, as an investor, it is not very easy to get a hold on all of these factors. And our experience is that people trying to time the market have not been very successful. Uh, Much like equity, where we always advise that look, uh, the short term valuations don't matter, the short term momentum doesn't matter. You need to look at long term where the companies can create wealth and so on and so forth. I think the same concept applies on the fixed income side also. If you keep one basic thought process in mind, that if you are going to be able to sit through one complete interest rate cycle, just one.
Sure.
So if you are going to be able to sit through one complete interest rate cycle, then your all the ups and downs will be evened out. You look at the long-term return of the debt mutual funds over last 25 years, last 10 years, last 5 years, last 3 years, the returns are pretty reasonable. Now you break it down into smaller segments, and then you see that every time uh, the markets move in a very unpredictable way, and trying to you know outgaze the markets have not worked, much like in equity. So the way to look at it is to look at debt as an asset allocation process. Let's look at the example of LIC. LIC is the one institution which gives a guaranteed return through the LIC policy. It covers the risk of life for so many people. Now, LIC doesn't change its portfolio because the interest rates are going up or down. What they do is simply they keep investing, and they are one of the most successful financial institutions in our country. So, I think rather than focusing too much on where the interest rates are going and trying to take a tactical position, it works much better to just sit through one interest rate cycle. The second part is that if you change your portfolio too much, taking interest rate call, there's a huge uh, disadvantage or handicap you have by way of the tax treatment of how your capital gains will be treated. Because if it is a short term capital gain versus a long term capital gain, there's a huge tax differential. So, whatever efficiency you get by taking the timing call right on the interest rates may not eventually come to your pocket, because it will be eaten away in the short term taxes. So I think one has to look at the asset allocation approach, let the money work for long term, and when the interest rates are going up, we can think also in terms of doing SIP in debt funds like we do in the equity fund, and that will average out. And therefore, I think once an interest rate cycle is complete, it will end up again, as I said, in a happy experience for the investor.
So just to understand a little more on your framework. So in terms of your framework, how does the framework evaluate the markets at the current juncture? So what's your overall sense? Which is the factor which you think is very dominant at this juncture in terms of taking internally your own funds? How do you take the interest rate call at the current juncture? How does this framework finally translate into the duration calls that you take?
So at this point, our thought process is that the interest rates are stuck in a range. Last year, the Reserve Bank took an extraordinarily loose monetary policy stance, primarily with two factors in mind. One is the COVID disrupted the financial markets. When we saw in the last March a lot of volatility in the market, and then the COVID disrupted economy. Because of the lockdown, there was a huge suffering on the economic growth side. So RBI maintained this ultra loose monetary policy with the twin objective of stabilizing financial markets and supporting the economic recovery. As we stand today, there is a significant improvement in the COVID situation, at least in India. I mean, just to give you two data points, from a case count of about a lakh a day in September, it has now fallen to below 15,000. From a cumulative case count of about 10 lakhs in September, it has fallen to about 1.5 lakhs today. This has happened at a time when we have had elections in so many states. We had the onset of the winter and past the peak festive season. And now we have two vaccines already operational in India, and there are a couple of more around the corner. So we can say with some degree of confidence that the COVID situation is improving and likely to improve further. Economy, after contracting around 24% in Q1 and then by about 7.5% in Q2, has rebounded in Q3. According to me, it has already done better than the December 2019 quarter in the December 20 quarter. In the current quarter ending March 21, I expect the economy to already grow by 4 to 5%. So both the reasons for which the RBI took the ultra monetary policy stance are now beginning to improve, and therefore the RBI does not need to be in the emergency mode going forward. We have already seen them. We have already seen RBI commence the liquidity normalization process. At the same time, there is a risk of a relapse as far as the COVID is concerned. The economic recovery is still in early stage. It requires handholding. Therefore, at this point, the big picture is that the interest rates may have bottomed out already in October and November, and they are possibly likely to inch up going forward. But at this time, the Reserve Bank will intervene to make sure that interest rates do not go up in a disruptive way. We have a strong tailwind from the global markets where the interest rates are likely to be stable for the next 1 year. And for now, we have a inflation number at 4.5%, which is a reasonable number. So at this point, the main challenge for the Reserve Bank is the supply management, because the fiscal deficit for the past year, for the current year, is also of a slightly higher order. So as long as it is not a macro fundamental issue, but the supply management issue in a benign global environment, RBI has enough of toolkit to manage that. Therefore, I think that for now, for the next 3 to 6 months, we are likely to see stable range-bound interest rates. But after that, it will depend on how the global environment emerges. We have the headwind in terms of the oil prices, which are at now around 1 year high. We have strong recovery in demand, and that could lead to demand push inflation. In the global world also, today there is a concern about the emerging inflation, because in the last 5 6 years, the low interest rates were largely driven by the monetary policy led quantitative easing. But in the West, in the last 1 year, all over the world, there is a huge fiscal expansion that has happened. So therefore, this time the liquidity may be driving inflation higher, unlike in the past where the liquidity was largely concentrated with the banks, which were not finding enough lending opportunities. So we are looking at a benign next 3 to 4 months where the interest rates will likely remain range bound, and thereafter, given the growth prospect, given the oil price trajectory, we believe that interest rates will move higher.
Right. So, just extending on the same lines, so broadly, whatever I've understood from what you said is that roughly around the next 3 to 6 months, the broad sense is that the interest rates might remain range bound, but yeah, eventually, over a period of time, it looks like the interest rates might inch up, but in a lot more gradual manner. So let's say somebody is coming with a lot of money right now, and he doesn't have a short time frame, neither does he have a very long time frame in order to play through an entire interest rate cycle. Let's say somewhere around 2 years or 3 years as a time frame. How should somebody approach different debt fund categories for an investor who's somewhere in between? Let's say somewhere between 2 and 3 years. So how would you suggest for that kind of time frame?
So first of all, in my view, 3 year is a good complete interest rate cycle, because cycles are getting shorter. But nevertheless, I think at this point, someone who has, let's say, about 1 year of investment horizon, for him, a low duration category is a good category. Why? Because as we said, for the next 6 months, we don't expect much of movement in interest rates. After that, we expect interest rates to go up. And also, the Reserve Bank has already taken a few steps to normalize liquidity. Therefore, the short-term rates have already moved up significantly from the bottom. So given that situation, the low duration fund gives you a good carry potential. Even if the interest rates go up in the next 6 months, whatever hit you see in the NAV, because most of the investments are around 1 year maturity, it will flow back into the NAV in the next 9 to 12 months when these papers mature. Therefore, in the current environment, low duration may be a very good category where you get the uh, extra carry because of the steepness of the yield curve that has now come. You are reasonably protected against any significant loss because most of the NAV it will flow back into the fund when these papers mature in the next 9 to 12 months. And then at the end of 1 year, if that is your view that the interest rates will go up, then that time you have the flexibility to then decide where you want to invest. But if someone has, let's say, 2 to 3 years of investment horizon, then I think he can spread his money, keep some in the low duration fund. But if it was my money, I would have put 60 to 65% of that in the duration funds because as the interest rates go up, the fund managers will get opportunity to invest that money at higher yields. And then over 3 years, I expect the interest rate cycle to be completed, and that will then end up in a very good situation.
Sure. There's also this notion which is going around that if you invest in a floating rate fund, then it's more or less like a hedge to a rising interest rate scenario. But from whatever we have seen in terms of the entire floating rate category, we've seen that most of these funds continue to be as volatile as any other normal debt fund in the same duration rate. So how should somebody look at this floating rate category?
See, I mean, if you look at the debt markets in India, the availability of floating rate papers is not really there. Most of the bonds that we have are fixed coupon bonds. So the percentage of the floating rate bonds outstanding in the market is hardly worth talking about. So how do you make your own floating rate fund? And which is why I talked about the low duration fund because it has a maximum duration of 1 year as per the SEBI guideline between 6 months to 12 months. Now, if your investments are say 12 months maturity, then in the next 12 months they will mature and then you will get the opportunity to reinvest at the interest rates prevailing at that time. Therefore, floating rate funds are first of all not very many in existence. That is an old historic category. Gradually in India, the floating rate market has not evolved that much. Therefore, you have to create your own floating rate fund where, if let's say if you invest in an ultra short term fund where the maximum maturity allowed is 6 months, then in 6 months you will expect a majority of the papers in that fund to mature. Therefore, that kind of a synthetic floating rate fund is one has to look at.
And also there is yet another point of view that roll down strategies can also be one of the options to play a rising interest rate scenario. So how would you go about looking at what's your view on this particular strategy?
Roll down strategy is a good strategy where you have a very steep yield curve. And then if you remain invested for 3 years, the 3 year paper becomes 2 year after 1 year and it becomes 1 year paper after 1 year. So that strategy, I will say, is a kind of a seasonal strategy. When your starting point is a very steep yield curve, then I think it's a good strategy. Now we have just come back from a very steep yield curve and now the yield curve is going to flatten. Now the difference this time is that we have had a situation for the last, let's say, 7 or 8 years where the domestic liquidity was always in deficit. And therefore, you had a very steep curve between, say, 0 to 1 or 2 year and then a flat yield curve. In the last 1 year, the Reserve Bank injected a lot of liquidity due to COVID disruption. And on top of that, we got about 100 billion plus increase in our forex reserves in the last 1 year. That added a lot of liquidity. That came at a time when the confidence in the stability of the long-term rates was little bit on the lower side because of the high government borrowing. Therefore, we have a very unique situation today where the yield curve was very, very steep between 1 to 5. So between 5 to 3 years, we had a spread of about 50 basis. Between 1 to 3 years, we had a spread of about 50 basis points and so on. Now, at this point, what we discuss is that the RBI is already on the job of liquidity normalization. whereas they don't want the long-term yields to go up because that would crowd out and disrupt the borrowing market for the government. So as the liquidity gets drained out or normalizes, it is the short-term rates which will move up. So we are looking at a typical fair flattening kind of a situation in the market on the yield curve. Therefore, at this point, I think the uh, roll down strategy may not be exactly good, but yes, once you have the curve come back to the normal shape, and if the spreads between, let's say, 3 year and 1 year is very steep, then it will look very good. So it's a strategy which works at a certain point in time, not always.
Sure, got it. Also, when it comes to somebody picking up debt funds, how should somebody look at size as a factor? Is larger necessarily better, or is small? I mean, usually there is a concern with smaller fund, sizes. So, how should somebody interpret a size when it comes to selecting debt funds?
I think it's a double-edged sword because sometimes the large funds may find it difficult to realign to the evolving interest rate scenario. Small funds may find it easier to do it. But I think it's a fair thing as a thumb rule. People have accepted that the larger funds have the breadth in the market. They have the ability to diversify their portfolio. And typically, large funds will also have a long-term track record because you don't make a large size fund overnight. So therefore, I think the size does give a sense of uh, comfort because it gives you a long-term history, the ability to diversify, etc. And therefore, that's a fair point. But I think how large is large and how small is small, that is something which has to be looked at in a specific case in a specific situation. Therefore, it's not always that the large is good or the small is bad, but as a thumb rule, I think that's a good reference point.
Sure. So broadly, if, from a Mirae Asset point of view, especially on the debt side, what are the risks that you will never take on the debt side? And so, what is risk for you, and what is acceptable risk for you, and what is like these are risks which we will never intentionally take in terms of the overall debt portion.
So, as I mentioned in the earlier part also that the biggest risk in debt business is the credit risk because if you lend money to someone and if he doesn't pay in time, then the whole business model is a challenge. So we first of all avoid any aggressive credit risk. Now, aggressive credit risk means uh, that we don't want to get into weaker companies. We normally look for investing in companies which have a strong business model, strong promoters. Most importantly, they have a visibility of the cash flow from operations to be able to repay their debt because that's where the core solvency of the company can be judged. Uh, Therefore, we avoid the aggressive credit risk. We are not at all worried about the interest rate volatility because interest rates can go up and down. There, as I said, just one interest rate cycle is enough to get a good experience. The second part is that we avoid complexity because you keep the business simple and it's very successful. So we avoid complex debt instruments like structured products or loan against shares or perpetual bonds or the uh, tier 1 tier 2 bonds where we had problem. Now perpetual bonds are not necessarily always bad instrument because some of the issuers are really AAA and very high quality issuers, but sometimes the convenience in those bonds are so complicated that you realize only when it is too late, like what happened with a couple of issues where there have been no repayment. So we try to basically keep the business simple, easy to understand, not get into too much complication because if I have to take a aggressive credit risk or one has to take exposure to exotic instruments, you might get into a stressed debt fund or a AIF which can take aggressive calls. If the investors are of the primary objective of safety and reasonable return, then I think as long as you avoid aggressive credit risk and complicated structure, it's okay. So these are the two risks we try to avoid as far as possible. Then the liquidity in the fund is very important because these are all open-ended fund. Everybody can ask for redemptions anytime. So we have a very robust liquidity model where we keep analyzing the asset and liability profile of the fund and make sure that we carry adequate liquidity both to deal with any unexpected situation on the redemption side or of any unexpected change in the market environment so that we can uh, either take advantage of that or get through it without too much of a challenge.
Sure. So broadly at the current juncture, what are the evolving risks that you are currently monitoring, and what do you think are the key things to currently watch out for?
From how we look at the situation and the kind of funds positioning we have, I think currently the risk really is of interest rates going up in a disruptive way because at this point there is a confluence of number of adverse factors. We are already at record low interest rates. We have a huge excess liquidity in the system, which might get utilized once the economy picks up, and therefore there is a possibility of the large government borrowing program crowding out the private sector at a time when the economy is growing or expected to grow in double digits. So there can be a disruptive interest rate movement, and in that situation, we are currently having a monetary policy which is actively intervening to keep the interest rates low. So that I think is one risk that we are watching, and we are trying to align the portfolios accordingly because that situation can change very quickly. We do not have aggressive credit risk, so that's not something that we need to worry about. In this point in time, I think to avoid interest rate volatility or adverse hit because of the interest rates going up in the next 9 to 12 months, that's something which needs to be avoided.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahendra, for all those wonderful insights. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.